Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon, and welcome to our third Mayoral Candidates Forum. My name is Graciela Moszkowski. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Community Media at CUNY's Newmark J School. This is part of a series of monthly forums that we have been hosting since January, and that will continue until June when primaries will be held. Connecting the candidates with a vibrant New York City community media sector is an important part of the mission of the center. We serve news organizations that provide essential news coverage for mostly communities of color and immigrant communities, more than 300 outlets covering neighborhoods in 36 languages other than English. Before I pass the mic on to Rong Xiaoping, reporter for the Chinese language Tsingtao Daily, who will be moderating the conversation today and introducing the candidates, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. And I would also like to bring to the candidates' attention a recent report on the impact of Executive Order 47, signed by Mayor Bill de Blasio, that mandates city agencies to spend at least half of the advertising budgets of the city agencies on the community media. Last year, thanks to this executive order, the city placed a record $9.9 million worth of advertising in the sector. That is 84% of the total print and digital advertising budget for the city. And this crucial spending became a lifeline for 230 publications and helped the city reach some of its most marginalized communities. More than 60 publishers, many of them today in the room with us, have signed an open letter requesting the next mayor to keep the executive order, or even better, to pass it into legislation. I will add the letter, or I will link to the letter in the chat box so that the candidates can have it and everyone can have it. If you haven't signed it and you're a publisher, you can still sign it. And we will make sure to share it with all the candidates moving forward. Finally, we have just announced a city elections initiative aimed at strengthening the relationship between political campaigns and the community media sector, and I will also be sharing the link to that initiative. The conversation will be recorded, and we will share the recording with all attendees after the forum ends, if you need then to more time for quotes. And to the journalists in the room, please use the chat box to offer your comments and to ask your questions to the candidates. And now to you, Rong. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rong Xiaoqing, reporter from Tsingtao Daily. I'm your moderator today. Today we have a full Zoom room of journalists from community media, as well as CUNY J School's student journalists, and welcome to you all. And also, we're lucky to have 4 mayoral candidates. They don't need much introduction by now, I think, but still I'll follow the protocol. I'll just introduce them to you by the alphabetic order of their first name. So first we have Art Chang. Mr. Chang built a dozen startups in New York City, all focused on technology as a force for good. He has had the privilege to work at some of the New York City's most important institutions, including CUNY, the Campaign Finance Board, and the Brooklyn Public Library. Those all gave him the tools and knowledge to make real solutions for the challenges faced by the people of New York City. The next we have Barbara Kevovit. She is the CEO and founder of one of New York City's largest female-owned commercial construction companies. Growing up in the Bronx and public schools, Barbara's mentality cultivated an entrepreneurial spirit from a young age. And by the time she was 7, she was selling snorkels and masks at her neighborhood pool. As a single mom, Barbara created a line of tools for women, authored 3 books, and launched a new construction firm. And many of you may have known this. She is also known for her role in the reality show, The Real Housewives of New York City. And the next we have Ray Mcguire. Mr. Mcguire, after earning degrees in law and businesses at the same time, he went to New York City for a job on Wall Street. Over the last 36 years, Mr. Mcguire has led businesses responsible for generating more than $20 billion a year in revenue, supporting public and private sector clients around the world. He recruited and built teams to do multi-billion-dollar deals and he advised the CEOs of companies on how to help their businesses grow, thrive, and create jobs. For the last 13 years, Mr. Mcguire was the head of global corporate and investment banking at Citigroup, and the longest tenured head of investment banking in the history of Wall Street. Last but definitely not least, Jocelyn Taylor. Ms. Taylor is the CEO of TaylorMade Contracting LLC, a general contracting firm specializing in residential, commercial, and public works. She's also the founder and chair of the New York City Minority Women Business Enterprises Alliance, whose mission is to assist the minority and women-owned firms in overcoming challenges related to obtaining access to opportunities in the federal, state, and city levels. Ms. Taylor is the modern progressive Democratic mayoral candidate advocating for more than 600,000 NYCHA residents in New York's tri-state area, as well as all of the others in underserviced communities. So before we start the forum, I'd like to just lay out some ground rules for all of our participants, and also give some time for our candidates to think about the answers of their first question, which is just an opening statement. So for our audience, if you have any questions, please type it in the chat box, which is located at the bottom of your screen, sort of like bottom middle toward the right. You don't have to wait until the end. You can do it immediately right now. But when you do so, please identify yourself by your name and your publication. And for our candidate, please keep your answers under 2 minutes because we want to include as many questions as we could in this 1 hour limit. And also by answering the questions, normally we follow the alphabetic order, but I know like all of you want to answer the question first maybe. So I will alternate between alphabetic order and the reverse alphabetic or some completely chaotic orders. So that give you then the opportunity to answer the questions first. Okay, let's start with the opening statement. And I know you have done that probably millions of times, but I want you to focus on the part that how do you differentiate your views and policies from your fellow Democratic competitors? Okay, Mr. Chang.
Hello, my name is Art Chang. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm a professional problem solver. The thing that differentiates me the most is that I have the heart of a real progressive, but I have the mind of a business person who has worked in many industries. I do want to make a comment here about the recent shootings in Atlanta, especially, and the rise of anti-Asian hate incidents nationwide and right here in New York City. Tomorrow, March 26th, is Stop Asian Hate Day of Action and Healing to commemorate this and to bring all the communities together. March 26th was picked because it is the anniversary of the date when the United States first passed its first anti-race bill in 1790, which prohibited non-whites from becoming citizens. I'm running because our city isn't working for anyone. I want to make it work for everyone. Our problems are interconnected, and that's the key to solving them. I know this because I have 30 years of unparalleled experience as a hands-on doer for the public good and also in business. In the public sector, I started at the New York City Corporation Counsel's office, helped put Queens West in the ground, the first digital live-work community in the United States. And then most recently, I was at the Campaign Finance Board for 9 years as a first Asian and the co-creator of NYC Votes. In the private sector, I started off in the arts and architecture. And then, as mentioned, I've done 11 tech startups and most recently worked at JP Morgan as a managing director, launching a new technology program in the global legal department. The two threads have come together in several times, not just at NYC Votes, and not just at CUNY, where I helped create a technology apprenticeship program that is now evolved into CUNY Tech Meetup, but also created the only web-based case management system in government child welfare in the country. Our city has problems, and I see those problems as opportunities. It's people like me who've been doing the work in the detail, solving problems, and it's time for someone like me to run this city. I'm a child of immigrants who grew up in white middle America. I never fit the image of what you're supposed to look like. I know what it's like not to belong, and that's why I came to New York City. That's why I want New York City to remain the place where everyone belongs and where the city actually works for everyone. I'm committed to making that dream of New York City a reality. And in the context of where we sit right now, I am committed to incorporating community media in all aspects of communication for the city. I think that we can do better than the executive order. We need to reach every community in the language that they speak, in the way that they take their information, and to meet everybody where they are in this great city. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chang. Mr. Kevovit, do you want to go the next? Please unmute yourself. Can you unmute? Yeah, I know this is very confusing. Like Zoom, I always talk to the air without unmute myself. Or Jennifer, can we help her to unmute?
Am I unmuted now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All
Great.
right.
So your clock start now, 2 minutes.
I did it. All right. Well, I'm Barbara Kevovit. Ni hao ma. I want to thank the CCM for having me here today. I'm a parent. I'm a single mom. I grew up in the Bronx from a middle-class, hardworking family. My mom was a school teacher in the public school system, and my dad was a mechanical engineer. The lessons that they taught me gave me the courage and determination to start the first female-owned construction company in New York City without any financial backing, without any family, without any resources in the toughest city in the world. I was challenged to break through this male-dominated field and prove that I can work with people from all genders, all races, nationalities, and build my business, overcoming adversity, creating opportunity, and basically building something out of nothing for both myself and the 57 employees that I have working. I'm running for mayor of New York City because we need fresh ideas, new faces, we need a change. New York City is in a state of chaos, which it has been prior to COVID. We've allowed our streets to become overrun with trash and homeless people who frankly deserve better. And you throw all this together and you have a government that's built on excuses by politicians. And if I was the mayor, this would not be the New York City that would exist. I think that we need a business person with a big brain, a big business brain that will build the government based on common sense policies and the needs of the working people. The working class people are the foundation of everything New York stands for, and they are our future. I have a diverse set of leadership skills that doesn't just derive from politics. I will lead and listen, and it's what I do in the field every day when I go to my job sites. I understand what it takes to build infrastructure. I want to be the mayor for the emerging population of New York so we can afford to build lives and create a middle income lifestyle so we can enjoy it. We can't afford to lose this generation of people, and we need opportunity, diversity, and better management. And I want women, especially, to be able to move up the economic ladder, and a police department that responds to the citizens and keeps the streets safe with a comprehensive plan to deal with social problems, which are homeless families and emotionally disturbed people. And I will leverage my business and construction background to rebuild New York and make it better, safer, and more inclusive than ever.
Thank you. Before I call Mr. Mcguire, I want to remind our participants or journalists, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. You don't have to wait until the end. Immediately when you get the questions, you can type it there. Okay, Mr. Mcguire, you want to go next?
Yes, I think
Mr. Mcguire?
Yes, your Wi-Fi may be a bit compromised. It's going in and out.
Oh, sorry about that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on continuance of your forums. I am Ray Mcguire and I'm running for mayor. I love this city. New York has given me everything. I got to New York based on the sacrifices of my dear mother, who's now 95 years old. I grew up in a neighborhood in Dayton, Ohio, raised by my single mother. I didn't know my dad. And she, along with my grandparents, raised me and my two brothers. And at any point in time, we had a half a dozen foster children in our home. And I grew up across the street from a paper mill that used to emit fumes so strong that the only way we could breathe was to open the refrigerator door. And based on my mother's sacrifices, I applied to and went to a school on scholarship where I had to walk 3/4 of a mile to a mile to get to a street corner where a bus picked me up. And I went to the school from 6th grade to 11th grade. In 11th grade, I had an A average. I averaged 28 points per game playing basketball. And I was president of the school. And I came east because the teacher said, if you're as good as they say you are, go east to test yourself, which I did. I applied to colleges. I got into Harvard College. I went to Harvard College and then on to Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. Based on my mother's sacrifices, I was able to get a great education. And so I came to New York with three things. I had a great education, I had a lot of debt, and I had no money. And this city's been great to me. It's where I met my wife and we're raising our three children, Leo, who is 8, Ella, who's 18, and Cole, who's been drafted first round into the National Basketball Association, and now is a starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. And professionally, the city has been great to me by giving me an opportunity for people who did not look like me to come in a world of corporate finance where I've been able to create jobs and advise governments and corporations around the world to make certain that they understood how they could grow and compete going forward. And so I have the experience of running a business globally, managing large budgets that got generated $20+ billion worth of revenue and created jobs and managed through the financial crisis. So I come to this, and I also was able to involve myself in civic organizations. I come to this with the lived experiences, with the professional experiences, and the relationships that are necessary to meet this city where it is. This city is today in a moment of crisis. And quite candidly, I am tired. I'm tired of the economy not being inclusive. I'm tired of 3rd to 8th grade Black and brown children operating below 70% below proficient. I'm tired of not having truly affordable housing. This city needs leadership that meets the moment. My plan is based on the economy, go big, go small, go forward, creating 500,000 jobs. It is based on safety and justice, and it's based on education. Make sure that all of our children in New York City get a quality education. That's a little bit about who I am. That's a little bit about what I've done. And that's a little bit about my plan and vision for this city. The largest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of New York City. No jobs, no economy, no jobs, no dignity, especially for the communities that have been the hardest hit. I've just come from a rally in Queens where the rally was for us all to come together into anti-Asian denouncement of any criminal activity, anti-Asian, anti-Black. We stand together. We must stand together. And enough is enough. We must be sick and tired of being excluded and make sure that we have the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this great city. And that's why I'm running for mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mcguire. Ms. Taylor, do you want to go?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank all the amazing organizers of this forum for putting this together. And just to start off, to reiterate what Art Chang said and Ray Mcguire said in regards to the anti-hate rallies, I had the opportunity to attend one on Sunday. And I just want to say that I hope that in my lifetime that we get to a place where we don't have to continue to have these rallies. We have to do our part to ensure that we teach the next generation how to be better, how to be more inclusive, and how to understand that none of us are our best selves by ourselves. We're all interconnected. So I just wanted to say that. You asked the question, what differentiates me from the other candidates? that are running for mayor. And I think I'm the only candidate that's running for mayor that actually has had to live in this city with policies, laws, and procedures that don't work, and have actually had that experience and had it impact my life. I grew up in Brooklyn in pink houses in East New York, which is a NYCHA development. I went to public schools here, taking the train to and from school since I was in junior high school. I've worked in city government at the State Division of Housing. I attended college here in Brooklyn at LIU. I've had the opportunity to work for Fortune 500 firms, as well as own my own business in the city. And if you've ever done work with the city of New York, you know how challenging that is. So I have a lot of lived experience in this city. And as someone who has lived in the city all my life, I love New York. And I'm running for mayor because me too, quite frankly, I'm tired. I'm tired of the excuses, and I'm tired of the inaction. We have found ways to legislatively tie our hands and keep the government from doing the right thing by people. Every day, myself included, everyday citizens of the city are doing their part. They're investing in the city every day. And it's time for us to ensure that they start to see a return on that investment. There's not a law, policy, or procedure in the city that hasn't been implemented by an ordinary man or woman who was doing the best they could with the information that they had at the time. But in this moment, we are holding on to a lot of policies that are not working. They're actually helping to create inequity and struggle. Systems that are not working to support the people that live in this city and allow them to be lifted up and live a whole purposeful life. So I'm running for mayor because whether you believe in God, spirit, universe, Allah, they created heavens and earth. We took that, we created food insecurity, homelessness, a failing transportation and education system, a climate crisis. If we want to change those things, all it's going to take is someone that knows firsthand the lived experience of the everyday New Yorker. We have to have leadership in the city that's not going to fight, because we've become very used to our elected officials telling us that they're fighting for us, and we're not winning. We're at a time where we don't need our elected officials to fight, but we need for them to come together and for there to be more inclusivity and more transparency. We need a mayor that's going to be hardworking, has compassion and common sense. And that is me. And that's why I'm going to be the mayor of the greatest city of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Now, let me ask my first question, and then I'll jump to the audience questions. We already have a lot in the chat box, and this time we'll go the reverse alphabetical order. So Ms. Taylor, you would be the first one. And also I want to remind everyone, please keep your answer under 2 minutes. And now I'm going to enforce the rule a little bit stricter so that we can have as many questions as we could. So my question is, as mayoral candidates, you all, I'm sure you're all like looking forward to the future, but if you could rewind the tape, and redo one thing in Mayor de Blasio's terms, and that would make the minority communities in the city have a better life, what would that be, and how would you redo it? Ms. Taylor.
Wow, that's a tough question because there are so many things we need to rewind the tape on. But as I go around the city and I talk to people, the one issue that I hear about over and over again is affordable housing and homelessness. And that's an issue that we have to address because stable housing creates stable communities. And none of us is stable without a decent place to live. And, you know, for the minority community, I think what I would have done differently is create more opportunities for equity. Because when we talk about, you know, equity in this city, a lot of times when we talk about minority communities, we're offering them Section 8 certificates. But if you have a Section 8 certificate and I have a home, we're not equal. And the one way we know that people in the city build wealth and legacy is through owning something. So as mayor, I would have tried to create more ownership opportunities for those minorities in the city, to create more stable housing, and give them more opportunity to be able to thrive in this city and do well.
Thank you. Mr. Mcguire?
Yeah, the economy is so essential. In 2020, we spent in the city spent $22.5 billion. 1.1 billion or less than 5% went to MWBEs. That means that 82% of the MWBEs in this city receive zero, nothing. My economic comeback plan specifically addresses making certain that I have a deputy mayor for MWBEs across each of the agencies to make certain that the allocations that we get to MWBEs is much greater than what we have seen up to this point. Others have talked about it. They've yet to deliver, other than perhaps in a press release. So the thing that should have happened, which is exacerbated by COVID, is that those small businesses and those entrepreneurs should be available to get access to the dollars that the city has spent. If I look just in the construction industry alone, with a goal of 8% of MWBEs, up to this point, we've gotten 0.5 to 0.7%. We're far off of our goals. So when it comes to economic inclusion, many of our communities, the Asian American community included, they have been excluded with a higher percentage of unemployment, hit very hard. We need to make certain that we have programs and that we have a commitment to an inclusive economy going forward, because the economy has been exclusive up to this point. And I'm tired of that fact continue to be what defines the existence of many New Yorkers. I would stop it, and my plan addresses it in specific.
Thank you. Ms. Kevovit? Ms. Kevovit?
Sorry about that. I would like to reiterate and add to what Ray Mcguire has said. I mean, I have had firsthand experience with the MWB so-called helpful experience, which is no help at all. I've spent countless years trying to navigate this, and it is basically actually it hasn't helped at all. So I would put together a whole committee for this to give minority and women-owned businesses much more leverage in this area. But I think for me, this all comes down to education. Coming from a parent who was a public school teacher in the Bronx and going through the public school system, I think for me, not only safe streets and clean streets, but an excellent education for all is one of the most important things. And I would focus on the minority, the Black community, the brown community, and making sure that we expand programs such as the Freedom Program, which brings in minority children so they can excel better and they can go off to colleges. And not only that, what I do believe, prior to the 1975 fiscal crisis, we had a free school system. The CUNY was a free college. My mom went there. I would absolutely, this would be one of the first things I would do, is make sure that we had a free education system in the city so that children can go right from junior school to high school to community college to senior college to a vocational school, because that's what we're missing in New York. And it's a flow chart. We need to fix the crime. We need to fix the education. We have to get our public transportation back on track so we can feel free, we can feel safe about riding the subways, because the subways are what makes business run. So you can't do any of the other things if you don't fix the foundation. And being in construction, being a builder, it's all about getting to the root, getting to the foundation and building from there. And so safe streets, clean streets, excellent education for all, especially minorities.
Thank you. Mr. Chan.
I think the first thing I want to point out is that people of color are the majority in the city. That actually Black and brown communities and Asian communities are the majority. And in fact, 40% of New Yorkers are foreign born, and a substantial percentage speak a language other than English. So when you think about the communities what unifies them and what unites them? The number one thing to me is poverty. That the first thing we have to do is to think about eradicating poverty. And what does that mean? Everybody deserves, I think everybody will agree that everyone deserves a roof over their head, food on the table, quality education for their students, and an equal and equitable chance at opportunity for the future. So the things that we have to do, and I'll just give you a quick illustration from the Asian community, we have the highest percentage of people who are below the poverty line of any ethnic group in the city. And when we look at the sort of connection between immigration and poverty, we see these cycles, and then we see those cycles perpetuate among groups like the Black community. That we need to actually address this, in a very, very powerful way. We need to fix our education system. I would start with universal childcare. We need to have the most expansive program for low-income housing, not affordable housing, low-income housing, because that's where the biggest gap has been. The third thing we need to do is have an education system that meets every student where they are. Today, I would say that over half of students have a learning difference, not just students who have an IEP, but all students because of the impact of remote learning. And then finally, we have to think about how we bring back small businesses. I love what everyone's saying around MWBEs, but that is going to be grossly insufficient. Small businesses represent over 50% of our employment prior to COVID and 100% of our job growth. And unless we bring small businesses back in a powerful way, we will not bring our city back and eliminate the differences among the people of color and the rest of our city.
Thank you. And now we have already got a lot of questions in the chat box. I'm gonna go through them basically by the order they put in. But let's go to the questions addressed to all panelists first. And then if you address to individual panelists, we'll come back to you later if we have time. Otherwise, you may directly contact their campaign to get the answer. So the first question is from Hannah Lin from Bolshevik Daily. How will each of you address the systematic issues that has exacerbated the already fraught housing crisis in New York City? What would be your comprehensive approach to addressing the estimated $3.5 billion in back rent accumulated from the start of the pandemic? Mr. Mcguire, do you want to go first?
Yes, listen, the housing crisis, which is exacerbated by the economic crisis, is one that for far too long we have talked about fixing. Today, it remains unfixed. We used to build 2.2 units of housing for every new job. Today, it's 0.5 to 0.7 units of housing. We are far behind. The demand has so exceeded the supply that it's become too expensive. My plan, my Go Big, Go Small, Go Forward plan is specifically designed to create truly affordable housing, where I would focus on truly affordable housing. I would make certain that we got some relief for those people who are now threatened for leaving their homes. I'd make certain that we had the vouchers, that we extend the moratorium. But by the same token, I'd make certain that we invested in the small businesses, many of whom are landlords, so we can give them some relief. So I want to make certain, one, that we prevent those people who are currently in situations where they may have to leave their houses, get them some support, prevent what's taking place in the homeless shelters. We're now warehousing people in shelters. I want to prevent that. I want to create some conversion of the existing stock and move people from shelters into homes. I want to build deeply affordable housing. And then I also want to build housing for those who have moved into and want to get home ownership. So I have a plan that's outlined in my Go Big, Go Small, Go Forward economic plan to address the housing crisis, which today is yet to be addressed, and also to have an immediate fix and focus on NYCHA, where today we got tickets that are open 130 some odd days, and we continue to talk about what is an 85-year-old institution, and we've yet to do anything about it. We need to get the Tenants Association, CCOP in a room to make sure that we've listened to them and that we have a plan that addresses the tenants and the residents' needs. That's my plan.
Thank you. Ms. Kevovit, do you want to go next?
Sure. I mean, the New York City is the largest landlord in New York. NYCHA is a federal obligation. NYCHA, the federal government has failed us. Why aren't we using NYCHA properties right now to house homeless families? Why are we giving millions of dollars a year to private providers that get arrested for abusing women and bribery? Okay, if I were mayor, I would first of all audit all of these private providers, okay? And then I would go into all the NYCHA property, audit the NYCHA property, and use the millions of square feet of space that we already have and divide it into homeless, affordable housing, and refurbish it. So I don't understand, why are we allowing these properties to fall in such disrepair? I think that, you know, I don't think we should be privatizing the NYCHA property, because if we privatize it, then corporations will take advantage and they will use it for their own pocket. So I think, being a builder, again, I don't believe that the city has been dysfunctional, to say the least, in utilizing the millions of square feet of property, land, and houses that we own. So I would go in and make sure and audit it all, and probably fire most of the private providers.
Mr. Chang, please.
That $3 billion is a staggering number of accrued debt. The last time I heard, it was over $1 billion. So that's a substantial increase. The problem is huge, right? We have about over 200,000 eviction cases pending in housing court. That's equivalent of the population of Boston. NYCHA has a housing population right now that is about 50% greater than it was designed to hold. So that represents the size of our low-income housing problem. So your question actually focused on what we're going to do about this debt, because this debt translates potentially into evictions for hundreds of thousands of people, and potential bankruptcy for people who can least afford to hold on to this debt. The only way that we can solve this problem is by working with the financial services industry, right? It translates into mortgages, which are held by landlords, and property taxes and other fees, which are held by the city. So on the mortgages front, what we need to do is to essentially stay the mortgages. We need to think about extending the term out, creating a payment-free period in the middle, which could then pass benefits through to tenants and erase the debt. The second thing is, where it goes back to the property taxes, is that the city needs a forbearance program on property taxes and other fees so that landlords are not saddled with those as well. The third element relates to small landlords, because we have thousands and thousands of small landlords who own a small house, who rent out 1 or 2 units in their house, and also are subject to the same thing. We need to look at the foreclosure situation for those tenants, for those owners, because those owners are the actual community fabric of their city, and so many of them are immigrants and people of color who are using real estate as a way to build capital that translates into intergenerational wealth and stability.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. You know, we're in an unprecedented time, and the government asks people to stay home and be inside because of this unprecedented situation. Now we have a 3.5 billion, you're saying, a number of people who are back in rent. And the reality of the situation is this: eviction moratoriums are not enough. The government asked the residents to do something, they did it. This is the moment that the government now has to step up and do their part. We see that they had a stimulus package that just came out that was $2 trillion. The president is now talking about another $3 trillion package. We need to ensure that there are funds in those packages to address this situation. People should not walk away with this, with the burden, the financial burden of this pandemic. So as mayor, I want to make sure that we provide grants to the small owners in return for rent forgiveness for the tenants, because to me, that makes sense. It creates a win-win situation. As it relates to NYCHA, as a former NYCHA resident, you know, I'm very passionate about what happens with NYCHA. The residents of NYCHA do not want Brad and don't want Blueprint. We've seen what privatization has done for affordable housing. It created a 20% increase in homelessness. We don't have to go down the road of privatization of NYCHA to know what's going to happen. We have to listen to the residents, and we should be focusing on creating ownership opportunities for those residents that have that capacity in the NYCHA developments. When we're talking about a $40 billion repair bill, the reality of the situation is that even if the federal government came and dropped $40 billion on the doorsteps of City Hall right now, we would not have the resources to fix all of NYCHA. So we have to come up with a strategy and a plan. And that's what my goal is, to come up with a strategy and a plan to make the repairs in a way that makes sense. And then going forward, when we build affordable housing, we have to build affordable housing based upon demographics, family sizes, and income levels that we know exist in this city. We do a ton of data analysis. It's time to use that data in an effective way so that we can create scenarios that allow people to have options as it relates to housing.
Thank you. So we'll go to our next question, and Ms. Kevovit, I want you to answer the first at this time. So our next question is from Javier Gauchish. Sorry, apologize for my pronunciation. The question is for all panelists. What is your plan of action to address the needs of the Hispanic community, such as education and employment? And how is your approach to the Hispanic community, in particular to the Mexican community that is an important part of New York City workforce? So, Ms. Kevovit.
Sure. Well, I want women, Latin women, African-American women to be able to move up the economic ladder just like I did. Like I was saying before, I believe that it all starts with education. If we can get young children in neighborhoods that are unfortunately, don't have the resources, we should get children that are in the 3rd grade, the 4th grade, and put them into programs, peer tutoring, summer camp. We should have things for people that don't speak English, an English program at the school so their parents can learn to communicate with the teachers. I think that we need this freedom program to expand the freedom program so we can have more children at younger ages that can go on to go into better schools and go to community colleges. Because like I said earlier, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I believe this all starts with education, because if you have a strong education foundation, that will eventually get more jobs. And what I would do as mayor to boost the economy is that I would try and enforce corporations like Citibank, like Chase, like other large corporations to hire more minority people, such as Hispanics and African Americans, in entry-level positions. So, you know, it all feeds into one another. And that's why I'm saying excellent education for all is so important, because if we want the emerging population, and we're missing that middle class element in New York City, and the way to get that back is to have more vocational programs, have more carpenters and electricians and plumbers and people that can earn a good living in New York City and work. And so it all starts with the education. And that's why I'm such a firm believer in education and the affordable housing and safe streets and clean streets. And I'll say it over and over again. If we don't have that, we won't have a prosperous New York City that we can look forward to in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor, please.
Yeah, so as it relates to education, we need to ensure that communities are supported based upon what their needs are at the appropriate level. Right now, when we deal with funding for education, we based the funding upon the property taxes for those areas. So what does that mean? That means that people in poorer communities that are more apt to have people who are renting as opposed to owners, they're going to have less funds invested in their community. So the way that we address that is that we ensure intentionally that we invest in every community at the same levels, regardless of property tax levels. And that's how we address that. And as it relates to employment, let me just say this, as the owner of an MWBE firm, I've gone to Albany and City Hall to advocate for MWBEs for a number of years. So how do we address ensuring that those communities get more opportunity? We need to change the procurement and the RFP processes to ensure that the opportunities are spread across the board and we expand the number of firms that we do business with. It's not just enough to engage more or certify more firms. We have to create opportunities for those firms. And then also, as it relates to the Mexican community, we have to make sure that people are not taking advantage of them, that they're not utilizing their immigration status as a means to harass or treat them badly or take advantage of their status here in the city. So we have to have more immigration support for the Mexican community and the Hispanic community. And I think that the Hispanic community relates a lot with the African-American community. We have to just, we want to create equity. You know how we create equity? We actually create equity intentionally. And that's my goal.
Thank you. Mr. Chan?
The first thing we have to do is to restore trust. Right now, we have a situation in the city where there is virtually no trust between City Hall and virtually any population in the city. And in particular, immigrant groups who are divided by language, but also by the diversity of their national origin, need to feel safe in the city. They need to feel like the City Hall can address each of them where they are, based upon who they are, because there's not just a single, Spanish-speaking population. There are Mexicans, Central Americans, and others who all have different cultures, different food, different cultural customs. The city needs to feel safe for them. So we need to feel like a sanctuary city where you're treated as an equal regardless of your immigration status. And that is extraordinarily important. One of my close friends is a principal in a middle school in Sunset Park, which is predominantly Spanish speaking, and where a large percentage of the students come from undocumented families. We need to make sure those families feel safe, that the school addresses their situation, that through COVID, which has disproportionately hurt this population, that we're thinking about their ability to learn, their ability to feel safe, their ability to feel lower stress before we think about how we actually go back to school. And so I think about schooling also as meeting every child, every student where they are, and individualized programs that are more cohort-based. And this can adapt as well to the additional struggles of folks who are who are English language learners. So we can combine these mixed language programs so that they can continue their education and actually enjoy the fruits of what should be a wonderful experience growing up and living and thriving in New York City.
Thank you. Mr. Mcguire, your answer?
Yeah, let me echo what Mrs. Kevovit said. Education is key. Education is what got me here. I have a plan to address what is now the inequities that we're experiencing in education. If you look at 3rd through 8th grade Black and brown kids, they are operating now at 70% below proficiency. If we take a group of 4th graders, Black and brown 4th graders, and take out 10 of those, 2 to 3 can read. So that says that we're not educating our children the way that we need to. My plan is called Cradle to Career or Cradle to Job. Pre-K is good, but we need to start before pre-K, and we need to expand pre-K 0 to 4, so that by the time our children get to pre-K, they're already prepared, which means affordable childcare, affordable parent care, and making certain that those people who are taking care of our precious children get compensated appropriately. And then I want to make certain, for my account, that every child can read by the end of the 3rd grade. Why is that? Because all the educators will tell you that between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learn. We have far too many who we didn't train and teach how to read. So I want to have that. I want to guarantee that takes place, by whatever means necessary. The current educators, those who have retired, making certain that we have even a New York City's tutor corps where we certify those teachers to teach our kids. And then I want to start beginning at the 6th grade to make certain that each of our children has digital literacy and financial literacy, and that they begin to get exposed to the kind of career opportunities. They can become plumbers or welders or coders or software engineers, but they get exposed to the different opportunities, and they get a summer job beginning in the 8th grade, a summer job, which could be provided if the government can't provide it, which I would hope that we would be able to, then have it provided by the private sector. So that by the time they get to graduation, they will have been exposed to different opportunities, summer jobs included, so they can make a choice of one of 3 things. They can go to those summer jobs, or they can go into the jobs that they've been prepared for and been exposed to. They can go to a 2-year or 4-year college. That would be my plan: cradle to career, cradle to job. And for those people, those students who this year, because of COVID and no access to broadband and no tablets, I want to make certain that we have an emergency plan where we can get retired teachers and others to teach our kids during the summer. Otherwise, we have lost them for far too long, and we do not have a track record of having remediated so those kids, especially the ones who in the 3rd grade without being able to read, can read. This is a moment of serious crisis when it comes to education, and unless we solve it today, the societal cost is going to be enormous tomorrow. So let's focus on it today and get our kids educated.
Thank you, Ms. Mcguire. We may still have time for 1 or 2 questions. And for the next question, we'll go back to the alphabetical order, but based on your first name. So our next question is from AJ Woodson. What would you do for better police community relations and police reform? And how do you feel the current administration has failed in this area? So Mr. Chang.
So I'll connect the 2 sides of that question together. There are 3 major problems with policing today in New York City. The first has to do with governance. The second has to do with the militarism of the response. And the third has to do with what we would define as success in policing. So on the first one, in one of the primary tenets of a democratic society is that we have an armed forces which obeys the command of their duly elected civilian leadership. We don't see that exhibited here in New York City. We need to actually take away 100% the full control over disciplinary matters from the police chief and give it to a broader function. We need to empower the CCRB to have more of an independent role. I would suggest something similar to the CFB, where it can actually weigh in and have an impact in its actual recommendations. Second, on the militarization of the police, we know that about 94% of 911 calls do not require armed intervention. So why do we send armed officers into every call? We must build, and I will build, a rapid response team that operates like the police 24/7, 365, that consists of a violence interrupter, mental health and social workers who can respond to these kinds of things. We also need to put these people on the street as well to take their place. And then the third element has to do with what we think of as success, right? Is success beginning and ending with a crime, or success beginning and ending with a prosperous community? So what I would do immediately as mayor is that I would take City Hall and my primary deputies, and I would go put ourselves in the places where there is substantial violent crime, so that we can experience what is going on in those communities and provide a direct line of communications between those communities and City Hall, and then begin to work together with those communities to come up with the plans to actually make these communities truly safe.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kevovit.
Okay, well, I have a lot to say about the police. We've had more shootings last year than we did in the past 14 years. Just on the L train, Morgan Station, there were 6 assaults with women in the past 2 months. You have people, you have homeless people, mentally disturbed people, throwing people onto the subways. I would intend to put police back on the subways. I think it's critical we do that immediately. If we can't ride the subway, going to work and coming back to work, then this town is never coming back. I don't think defunding the police is the answer, but I do think getting police out of the homeless business is the answer, because police are not psychiatrists and then they're not trained to deal with mentally ill people. I don't believe that the city has a comprehensive plan to deal with the mental health issues. We have plenty of competent and well-trained social service professionals on the city payroll. I mean, why aren't we using them instead of the police? Maybe we can use them to ride with the police to prevent incidents that happen where there's violent outcomes. I think the homeless situation and the police situation go hand in hand. And I think that we have to stop paying people off for campaign contributions. And I think that if we focus on getting the police out of the homeless business and getting committees set up, because frankly, I think that the police have done a remarkable job preventing another terrorist attack since 9/11. Let's look at that. We have not had another incident like that since 9/11. So I would like to see the police not get heavy artillery that is surplus from the federal government. So I don't think they need that. But I would like to see the police go into areas that might have more crime than other areas. But I think getting the police out of, I think people feel over-policed and underprotected right now. But I do think that the police are very necessary. And I think that we have to recreate and build our relationship again with the police, because we live in the best city, the toughest city, the largest populated city in the country, and we need our police. We just have to figure out how to get along better with them.
Thank you. And Ms. Mcguire, please.
Yeah, I have a plan, and I also must acknowledge that after this, I think I'm going to have to excuse myself, but let me explain to you my plan. It's called respect, accountability, and proportionality, which is that which we need to restore to between the law enforcement agencies and New Yorkers, because that's been breached today. There's limited to no respect. There's limited to because there's no accountability, and because what is used today is disproportionate. Disproportionate means that it has been said by others, if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. In many of our communities, it's a sledgehammer. And that has caused a rupture in the respect that exists between law enforcement. So my plan is the following. I want to appoint a deputy mayor for public safety, overseeing what takes place between New York City and the commissioner and the NYPD. I want to make certain that the chain of command is held accountable. So not only the officer who is committing the aggressive policing, for which, by the way, we pay $200 million a year. So I want to take those funds and reallocate those funds. I am not for defunding, I'm for better policing. And I want to make certain, so that's chain of command. I'm going to create an emergency social services bureau that operates 24 hours, 7 days a week, to go sit in the precincts and go either before or with the NYPD, given that 4 out of 10 calls now that go into 911 have to do with mental health issues, and we need to address them. I'm going to take funds, return to community policing. At one point, we had police athletic leagues where they're interacting on a frequent basis with the people in the community. I want to make certain, and I want to make certain that we have the CCRB get full investigative authority. It takes rather than it take 48 days to get video cam footage, I want to have them get it in 48 days so that they can also be involved. And I want to ultimately be held accountable for what takes place within NYPD.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you so much. You know, I recently heard somebody say that we have to bring neighbor back into neighborhoods. And we also have to bring community back into policing. When I grew up, I knew Officer Myers in my neighborhood. I didn't see him as a threat. I had a sense that Officer Myers cared about me. He knew my mom and my dad. It was a different relationship. But right now we have to ask ourselves, we're spending $6 billion on policing. Are we getting our money's worth? You know, we always talk about return on investment in whatever it is that we do. For the that we're investing, are we getting throughout the communities in the city, are we getting the returns that we want to see? If we invest funds in a more proactive manner, I think that we'll get a better result and we can have less policing and more safety. And that to me, that's the place that we need to be able to get to. You know, when we look at the city, as diverse as this city is, when you look at TV, you wouldn't think that crimes are happening in you would think that crimes are happening just in minority communities. So we have to ask ourselves, what are these other communities receiving that these communities are not receiving? So we invested in what those other communities are receiving, the education, the employment. One of the things I say is, you know who's not out committing crimes? Someone who has to get up in the morning and go to a job. So we have to bring community back into policing, and we have to invest in the return that we want to see. And that means creating opportunities for people. That means making sure people get a decent education. That means making sure that neighborhoods are safe, but doing it in a way that's inclusive so that people feel safe and not like they're being policed.
Thank you very much. And we're running out of time now, and we still have a lot of good questions. I'm so sorry for the folks whose question hasn't been asked, but the campaigns can use the time to type your contact info in the chat box so that our journalists can do follow up. And for our journalists, don't worry if you missed the words or missed a figure. This whole conversation was videotaped, and we're gonna send you the link afterwards so that you have all the information. And thank you very much.